The sun beat down, warming their faces. Laughter echoed across the water. The friends paddled their kayaks deeper into the swamp. Cypress trees rose from the murky depths draped in Spanish moss. It was a perfect day for an adventure. Mark, the experienced one, led the way. He pointed out a snowy egret perched on a log, its white feathers gleaming. Sarah, always the photographer, captured the moment. John, trailing behind, hummed a tuneless song, enjoying the peace. They stopped for lunch on a small island, a patch of dry land in the sea of green. Sandwiches and fruit never tasted so good. As they ate, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the cypress trees. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, casting an ominous shadow over their idyllic day. "We should head back," Mark said, a note of concern in his voice. The first raindrops, fat and heavy, splattered on the leaves around them. A low rumble of thunder echoed in the distance. The wind whipped at their faces as they paddled furiously. Rain lashed down, blurring their vision. The kayaks bobbed precariously in the churning water. John, fear gripping his throat, struggled to keep up. The storm broke with a deafening roar. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the swamp in an eerie, flickering light. The wind howled through the trees, tearing at branches and sending leaves swirling through the air. Suddenly, Mark yelled, pointing a trembling finger towards a tangle of roots near the bank. Two eyes, glowing red in the lightning flashes, stared back at them. An enormous alligator, larger than any they had ever seen, emerged from the water, its massive jaws agape. Panic seized them. They paddled with desperate strokes, but the storm was relentless, pushing them closer to the waiting predator. The alligator, sensing their fear, surged forward, its powerful tail propelling it through the water with terrifying speed. The alligator lunged. Its jaws slammed shut on the back of John's kayak, teeth like daggers piercing the flimsy plastic. John screamed, his voice lost in the roar of the storm. He was thrown into the churning water, his kayak spinning away, useless. Mark and Sarah watched in horror, paralyzed by fear. The storm raged around them, lightning illuminating the scene like a macabre puppet show. John thrashed in the water, his desperate cries swallowed by the wind. The alligator circled, its black eyes gleaming with predatory hunger. It moved with a terrifying grace, its massive body barely disturbing the surface of the water. John, his strength fading, made one last desperate plea for help. The alligator struck. A sickening crunch echoed across the water as the creature's jaws closed around John's torso. Blood bloomed in the water, staining the murky depths a gruesome crimson. John's screams were cut short, replaced by the sickening sound of bones crushing. Mark and Sarah could only watch in horror, their blood turning to ice in their veins. They knew with a certainty that chilled them to their very souls that they were next. The storm raged on, indifferent to their terror. The alligator, its hunger momentarily sated, disappeared beneath the surface of the water. The ripples from its passing spread out, disturbing the reflection of the lightning-streaked sky. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the storm itself. Mark shook off the paralysis of fear. He had to survive. He had to save Sarah. "We have to go!" he yelled, his voice barely audible above the wind. He paddled furiously, desperate to escape the scene of the nightmare. Sarah, still in shock, struggled to follow. The storm showed no mercy. Waves crashed over their kayaks, threatening to swamp them. Lightning flashed, momentarily blinding them. The wind seemed to mock their efforts, pushing them back towards the lurking danger. Mark risked a glance back. He couldn't see the alligator, but he could feel its presence, a cold dread settling in the pit of his stomach. They weren't safe. They would never be safe. A fallen log wedged between two cypress trees offered a sliver of hope. It was a long shot, but it was their only chance. "We have to get out of the water," Mark yelled, pointing towards the log. He steered his kayak towards it, his heart pounding in his chest. Sarah followed, her face pale with terror. They scrambled onto the log, their kayaks bumping against the submerged branches. The log was barely above water, slippery with moss and rain. It offered little protection, but it was better than being in the water at the mercy of the lurking alligator. They huddled together, shivering in the cold rain, their eyes scanning the water. Every ripple, every splash of rain sent their hearts racing. They were sitting ducks, waiting for the inevitable. The storm raged on, an endless torrent of wind and rain. Hours seemed to crawl by, each one stretching into an eternity. The log offered little comfort, cold and unforgiving beneath them. Sarah, her voice trembling, whispered, "Do you think it's gone?" Mark shook his head, his face grim. "No, it's out there, waiting." He wished he could offer her words of comfort, but there were none. They were trapped, alone in the heart of the storm. The storm began to die down. The rain eased to a drizzle, the wind to a mournful sigh. The clouds parted, revealing a sliver of moon peeking through the darkness. The silence was deafening. Mark scanned the water, his eyes straining in the dim light. He could see movement in the shadows, a ripple that was too deliberate to be the wind. The alligator was still out there, closer now, hunting. A low growl, guttural and primal, sent shivers down his spine. It was close, too close. He grabbed Sarah's arm, his fingers digging into her skin. "Get ready," he whispered, his voice tight with fear. The alligator surfaced, its eyes glowing red in the moonlight. It was even larger than Mark had imagined, a monstrous creature straight out of a nightmare. It stared at them, its massive jaws opening in a silent snarl, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Sarah screamed, a high-pitched sound that echoed through the stillness of the swamp. Mark pulled her close, his mind racing. They were sitting ducks, trapped on the log. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Then just as suddenly as it appeared, the alligator submerged, disappearing beneath the water once more. The ripples spread out, reaching the log, sending a tremor through their fragile sanctuary. The silence returned, heavier, more oppressive than before. They were granted a reprieve, but for how long? The wait was agonizing. Each rustle of leaves, each splash of water sent their hearts pounding in their chests. The moon, now free of clouds, cast an eerie glow on the water, highlighting every ripple, every shadow. Then it surfaced again, closer this time, its eyes fixed on them with unwavering intensity. Mark knew this was it, the final confrontation. He pushed Sarah behind him, his body a meager shield against the monster. "Go!" he yelled, his voice hoarse with fear and adrenaline. "Get out of here!" The alligator lunged. Silence descended upon the swamp once more. The moon, now high in the sky, illuminated the scene. The log, broken and battered, bobbed in the water. One kayak drifted aimlessly nearby, its plastic hull ripped open. The storm had passed. The sun would rise soon, but for the kayakers, there would be no new dawn. The only sound that broke the silence was the gentle lapping of water against wood, and somewhere beneath the surface, the contented sigh of a monster.